Welcome to my viewers. Tonight's story will make you question whether time moves in a straight line or if it folds in on itself when no one's watching. What you're about to hear sounds impossible, but it's real. At least it was real to me. I don't usually tell people about this because it sounds completely insane, but back in 2017, something happened that didn't just mess with my head, it made me question reality itself. I was living in a rundown apartment building in central New Jersey, a depressing 3-story brick structure that looked like it hadn't seen an upgrade since the 80s. The hall lights buzzed softly, and every door had chipped paint and crooked deadbolts. I shared the place with my roommate Nick, who worked nights doing security for a warehouse just outside of town. That meant most evenings I was home alone. It was a Thursday night in early February. I remember it vividly because I got home a little later than usual, and as I climbed the stairs, this weird smell hit me. Burnt rubber, mixed with that sharp citrus scent from industrial cleaner. The second I smelled it, something shifted in me. It triggered this bizarre memory that didn't even feel like mine. I kept walking down the hallway, and then out of nowhere, bam, this overwhelming wave of deja vu slammed into me. It wasn't subtle. It was like I had been dropped into a scene I'd already lived down to the smallest detail. I froze about 5 feet from my door. My heart was pounding. I knew what was about to happen. First, the hallway light above me would flicker twice. Then a woman from downstairs would yell something muffled and loud. Finally, at the far end of the hallway, something heavy would fall, a dull metallic thud, and that's exactly what happened. In that exact order. I remember just standing there, confused more than afraid. I thought maybe I had dreamed it before, maybe it was just some weird brain glitch. But the next night, it happened again. I was eating leftover Chinese food in front of the TV when I suddenly knew what line of dialogue was coming next. Not guessed. Knew every word, every sound, even the moment my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It happened just the way I remembered it, even though I had no way of remembering it. Over the next 5 days, this got worse, or stranger, depending on how you look at it. These moments became more frequent. I started writing them down before they happened to test myself. I was right every single time. I knew when Nick would text. I knew when the neighbor's dog would start barking. I knew what was going to be on the radio before I turned it on. And the weirdest part, they didn't feel like memory. They felt like reminders. Like I was being nudged about things I hadn't lived through yet. And then the dreams started. Every night. The same dream. I was lying in bed, and my door creaked open. Nick stood there, pale and sweating, and said, "There's someone in the building." But his voice, it sounded wrong, too flat, too mechanical, like a bad audio recording. I'd ask him who it was, and he'd just stare at me. That dream repeated night after night, until one night, it wasn't a dream. It was 3:12 a.m. when my door opened, and there was Nick, looking just like he did in the dreams. Same pale face, same sweat-soaked shirt, and he said it word for word, "There's someone in the building." I didn't even hesitate. I grabbed the bat from under my bed and followed him into the hallway. He pointed toward the stairwell. No one was there, but something wasn't right. The air felt too still. The shadows didn't move the way they should. We called the police. They found nothing. The next morning, I told Nick about the dreams. He just stared at me and said, "I've been having them too." That's all he said. That was the last time either of us spoke about it. And after that night, the deja vu stopped. But sometimes, even now, I'll hear something or feel something, and it's like I'm right back there. A flicker of sound, a tug in my chest, and I wonder, is it starting again? I've started to believe that maybe our memories aren't just memories. Maybe they're echoes from parallel versions of ourselves. Timelines stacked over one another like peeling wallpaper, just close enough to overlap. Sometimes I wonder if that hallway was a weak spot, a seam between two versions of reality, a place where something bled through. I moved out 6 months later, but I still drive past that old building now and then, and every single time, I feel it. That pull, like some part of me wants to go back, like something is still waiting at the end of that hallway. Not a ghost, not a person, just a decision I haven't made yet. And one day, I'm scared I might stop the car and go inside, just to see what happens next. My name is Ryan, and this happened 3 years ago, when I was 17. My brother Chris was 19 at the time. We live in a small, quiet town, surrounded by thick woods. Nothing much happens around here, so kids like us get bored pretty fast. There's a trail near our house that stretches deep into the forest. People say it leads to old ruins and strange places hidden in the trees. We'd always joked about exploring it, but never actually went until one October weekend. We were bored, and Chris mentioned a house he'd heard about from some kids at school. Supposedly it was abandoned and hidden way out there. It was a cool, cloudy afternoon. The leaves had all turned that deep fall color, making it a perfect day for a walk. We packed a couple of water bottles and flashlights, told our mom we were going hiking, and left around 3 p.m. The sun starts going down early in October, so we figured we had about 2 hours to make the trip and get back. At first it felt like a normal hike. I'd walked parts of this forest before, but about 10 minutes in, something strange started happening. It was like I knew the trail already, not just in a general way. Everything felt like a memory, like I had done this exact hike before, and even had this same conversation with Chris. At one point we passed a broken fence post along the trail, and it was like I'd seen it in a dream or something, but I knew I had never been down this path in my life. Chris kept talking, rambling about something, but I couldn't focus. I kept scanning the woods, feeling this eerie sense of recognition. Then I suddenly remembered a tree, thick and hollowed out, just off the side of the trail. I knew exactly what it looked like. And sure enough, 5 minutes later, we passed it. I didn't say anything to Chris. I've had déjà vu before, but this felt heavier, more intense. With each step, more images came to me. I saw a house in my mind, a 2-story building, with faded green paint, a broken front step, shattered glass on the top floor, and dead vines crawling up the sides. I'd never seen that house in real life, but I could picture it down to the tiniest detail. We finally reached the house, between 3:30 and 4, and there it was, exactly like I'd imagined. I stopped walking, just frozen. Chris kept going toward the porch, while I stared at the house, feeling my stomach turn. I started to doubt myself. Maybe I had seen it before, maybe on the internet or something, but I couldn't think of a single time I had. I asked Chris if it looked familiar to him. He gave me a confused look, and said no. I told him I was getting déjà vu, strong déjà vu, and it was creeping me out, but I didn't want to back out, so I followed him up. The front door was cracked open, like someone had already been here. Chris gave it a push, and it opened with a long, painful squeak. Inside, it smelled exactly like you'd expect. Musty, stale, rotting wood. The silence inside was eerie, not just quiet, like a kind of pressure on my ears. We stepped in and saw broken furniture, torn up wallpaper, and a staircase going up on the left. We checked out the first floor. There was a dark kitchen with no light coming in, a dusty living room with a fireplace, and a hallway ending in a single closed door. The entire time, I felt eyes on me, like someone was there, just out of sight. Chris said the place was giving him the creeps. I nodded. Then I said something without thinking. I remember this place. He stopped and looked at me. What do you mean? I hadn't meant to say it out loud. The words just slipped out, but I repeated them. I remember this house, the kitchen, that hallway, even the fireplace, and I remember a woman upstairs. Chris gave me that look, like he thought I was just trying to scare him. I told him I wasn't joking. I said I don't know how, but I've been here before. I remember someone upstairs. I could see it unsettled him, even if he didn't say it. But it was that kind of setting. It doesn't take much to put someone on edge. We stood there for a second. Then we heard a noise. A soft creak, like someone stepped on a loose floorboard. From upstairs, Chris and I locked eyes. Neither of us said anything right away. Then he dared me to go up and check. I flat out refused, and said we should leave. He didn't agree. Instead, he convinced me to play rock, paper, scissors to decide who would go up. I lost, but I still didn't go. Chris said he'd do it himself, and started up the stairs. Each step made an awful creaking noise. As he went up, I followed, but I only went as far as the top of the stairs. Chris walked slowly down the hallway toward the last door on the right, the one that was slightly open. He reached for it, and pushed it open further. I couldn't see into the room from where I was standing, but I saw Chris freeze, and then suddenly, he screamed. He shoved past me and nearly knocked me over. "Run," he yelled, and we did. We bolted down the stairs, out the door, and didn't stop running until we reached the trail again. Even then, we didn't stop until we were gasping for air. My chest was pounding so hard, I couldn't hear straight. I asked him what he saw. He looked pale. There was a woman. He's standing in the corner, staring out the window. She didn't move. She looked like a statue. Then he looked at me and said, "How the hell did you know she'd be there?" I accused him of making it up. I thought maybe he figured I was messing with him, and decided to turn it back on me. But he never admitted it. Not that day. Not weeks later. Not even years later. He stuck to his story. He saw someone in that room. Part of me still wonders if it was a prank, but another part knows it wasn't. We both heard those creaking steps. Something was up there. And what I remembered, those specific images, those intense feelings. It was way too clear to be a coincidence. I'm just glad I wasn't the only one who looked into that room. That day changed how I see Deja Vu. Forever. In 2020, during that weird period between lockdowns and half-open businesses, life started to feel less like real life and more like I was stuck in some scripted loop I couldn't escape. I was driving home late one night from my girlfriend's place around 1:30 in the morning. It had just snowed, not a blizzard, but enough to make the roads slick and unforgiving. I live in a small town near Scranton, Pennsylvania, and there's this one intersection close to my house that's known for being a death trap. 4 stop signs, no traffic lights, and when it snows, you have to just hope the other drivers follow the rules. As I neared that intersection, a strange heaviness settled in my chest. It wasn't fear, not exactly, more like a weird sense that I didn't belong in that moment. Like I was replaying something I'd already lived through. I eased off the gas even though I had the right of way. That's when a black pickup came flying through the stop sign to my left, not even slowing down. If I hadn't already braked, it would have slammed right into the side of my car. I pulled over, heart pounding, watching its tail lights fade into the snowy distance. That crash would have killed me. I was sure of it. But what rattled me more was how certain I was that I knew it was coming, not from instinct, but memory. I remembered the sound of crunching metal, the windshield shattering, the airbags slamming into my face. None of it had happened, and yet it felt real, like I had already lived it. I blamed it on stress, pandemic anxiety, isolation, lack of sleep, whatever. But a few nights later, it happened again. I was at a red light, and I knew what song would come on the radio a second before it did. I knew there'd be a woman walking her dog across the street before she even appeared. It started to feel like I wasn't experiencing the present. I was just reenacting it. Then the dream started. Always the same road, always the same crash. Every night, more vivid. In one dream, I stepped out of the wreck and looked back at my car to see myself slumped in the driver's seat, eyes glazed, blood running from a deep cut on my temple. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and wet. On the fifth night, I woke up drenched in sweat and made a promise. I wouldn't take that road again. I went 10 minutes out of my way and used the highway instead. That same day, a friend messaged me. There'd been a fatal crash at that exact intersection. At the same time I usually drove through it. Same make and model as my car, same color, different driver, same outcome. Ever since then I've wondered, was I remembering a version of my own death from another timeline? Did some piece of me get rerouted at the last second? Or was I just the version that got spared, while another didn't? I haven't had an episode like that since. No intense deja vu. But every so often, when I'm driving late at night and the road feels too familiar, I get chills. Maybe part of me remembers something I shouldn't. Later I looked into near-death experiences and started seeing the same patterns. People talking about memories of events that hadn't happened yet. And almost all of them involved a brush with death. It made me think, what if deja vu isn't just a brain glitch? What if it's the leftover trace of slipping through some kind of seam? Maybe time doesn't move in a straight line at all. Maybe it loops, reloads, resets, and every now and then something inside us remembers what came before. If that's true, then maybe those close calls, the ones we chalk up to luck, aren't random. Maybe they're echoes from another run-through, and some deeper part of us is doing everything it can to keep us alive this time.
Have you ever had a moment so strange, so chilling, that it made you question reality itself?
Tonight's story isn't just eerie, it's unforgettable. Welcome viewers, settle in for a tale that still haunts me to this day. This is the story of Miss Adelaide and a night shift that changed everything. Before I worked in IT, I spent 2 years doing overnight shifts at a long-term care home in upstate New York. It was an older facility, slightly run down, but functional. We had a handful of residents with Alzheimer's or dementia, but most were stable, elderly folks just living out their last chapter. There was one woman though who always stood out, Miss Adelaide. She was 87, mostly lucid, very sweet, and very quiet. She had this old faded photo of a young boy on her nightstand. Her grandson, she called him, but no one ever came to visit. I settled into a routine. Rounds at midnight, hourly checks. Most nights were dull, but every so often, I'd find Miss Adelaide awake staring blankly at the ceiling, humming this slow, almost sorrowful tune. Then came the first real incident. It was around 2:50. I entered her room, and she was sitting up, eyes wide open. When I gently asked if she needed anything, she said in a calm but chilling voice, "You already asked me that. You ask every night, but tonight is different." I froze. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it, as if she'd rehearsed it. I laughed it off nervously and offered her water. She refused and quietly added, "You should remember this part." The next morning, I mentioned it to my supervisor. They shrugged it off, said it was confusion, maybe a lingering dream, but the following night, the exact same words, same tone, same look in her eyes. And on the third night, she was gone, passed away in her sleep around 1:50 a.m. When I got to her room, the bed was already made. Her few belongings were boxed, like she had never been there, but I couldn't shake that feeling, like I was part of a scene she'd seen play out dozens of times before. I started digging through archived incident logs, and sure enough, this had happened before. Notes from years prior described identical experiences, Miss Adelaide repeating the same eerie phrases, sometimes even predicting future events. One file from 2013 recorded her saying, "You always take your break at 3. The nurse looked at their watch, and it was exactly 3. It was as if Miss Adelaide wasn't just remembering something, she was reliving it, caught in a loop, a glitch, something beyond understanding. Maybe she had seen it all before, over and over again. and was trying desperately to change something. Now that I'm out of healthcare and working in IT, I still think about her every so often. I get this rush of déjà vu, a moment that feels eerily familiar, and in those moments, I stop, I listen, because maybe it's not just the brain misfiring, maybe it's a message, maybe Miss Adelaide is still out there reaching across timelines, whispering, you should remember this part. And it's not just me. Over the years I've met others who worked at that same care home. Different years, different departments. But when I brought up the place, they'd often say the same thing. That place gave me the weirdest dreams. One woman told me she remembered a patient who said, you won't be here much longer. She brushed it off until she was laid off a week later, downsizing. She never remembered the patient's name. I didn't press. I think about Miss Adelaide often, more than I probably should, and sometimes when I'm falling asleep, I hear that soft humming tune in my dreams, the same one she used to and each time I wonder, am I really dreaming, or am I hearing it again? Thanks for watching. And if this story gave you chills, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more real horror stories, and drop a comment below if you've ever experienced something you just can't explain. Who knows, maybe it's a loop, maybe we're all just trying to remember this part. Until next time, stay safe, and stay aware.